The security guards jeered as they scattered her possessions across the metal table, but their laughter died instantly when they saw what tumbled out of her worn backpack. The morning sun beat down on the limestone walls of Fort Kessler, casting long shadows across the visitor checkpoint, where 3 security personnel sipped their coffee with the comfortable ease of those who'd found their place in the world. The sprawling military research facility stood as a monument to order and discipline in the rolling hills of western Pennsylvania, its entrance a gleaming testament to the divide between those who belonged and those who didn't. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Staff Sergeant Donovan, a square-jawed man with 22 years of service etched into the lines around his eyes, watched the approaching figure with practiced suspicion. At 45, he'd spent the last decade manning this checkpoint, developing what he considered an infallible instinct for trouble. His morning had fallen into its familiar rhythm, checking IDs, exchanging pleasantries with familiar faces, maintaining the invisible barrier between military precision and civilian chaos. "Heads up," he muttered to his colleagues, Corporal Rodriguez and Private First Class Miller. "We've got a walker at 2 o'clock. Rodriguez straightened his uniform, eager to impress. At 26, he viewed every interaction as an opportunity to demonstrate his worthiness for promotion. Miller, barely 20 and still adjusting to military life, followed his lead with nervous energy. The woman approaching the gate moved with an odd, halting gait. Her shoulders hunched forward under a faded olive-green jacket that hung from her thin frame like a sail without wind. Dirty blonde hair escaped from beneath a weathered baseball cap, framing a face that spoke of hard years and harder choices. The scuffed boots on her feet had once been military issue, now worn down at the heels and caked with mud. $10 says she's another groupie, Rodriguez smirked, using the derogatory term they'd coined for civilians who dressed in military surplus, playing at a life they'd never earned. Probably wants to take selfies with real soldiers. Donovan's mouth tightened with familiar contempt. In his eyes, there was nothing more pathetic than civilians who dressed the part without understanding the sacrifice. His gaze tracked the woman's approach, noting the backpack slung over one shoulder, the calculated way she scanned the perimeter, almost like someone assessing security protocols. The spring air carried the scent of freshly cut grass and diesel fuel, the olfactory signature of military installations worldwide. Around them, Fort Kessler buzzed with morning activity, soldiers jogging in formation, civilian contractors arriving for work, officers striding purposefully toward administrative buildings. The flag snapped in the breeze, its colors vivid against the clear blue sky. The woman reached the checkpoint and stopped, standing perfectly still despite the wind that tugged at her clothing. Up close, her face revealed more than just hardship. There was a calculation in her pale blue eyes, a sharpness that seemed at odds with her disheveled appearance. "Morning," she said, her voice surprisingly steady and clear. "I'm here to see Major Lawrence in Research Division." Donovan exchanged glances with Rodriguez. The Research Division was one of the most secure areas on base. Even mentioning it raised immediate red flags. "ID," Donovan demanded, not bothering to hide his skepticism. When she reached into her pocket, he noticed calluses on her hands. Not the soft hands of someone who'd spent their life behind a desk. She produced a worn civilian ID card, offering it without comment. Donovan took it, noting the name Eleanor Reeves and the address that placed her residence in a part of town known for its homeless shelters and halfway houses. "Ms. Reeves," he said, deliberately emphasizing the civilian honorific. "Research Division is restricted access. Do you have authorization paperwork?" "I should be on the visitor list," she replied, her gaze steady, unintimidated by his tone. "Major Lawrence is expecting me." Rodriguez snorted softly. "Yeah, I bet he is." Eleanor's eyes flicked to him, then back to Donovan, her expression unchanging. A small crowd had begun to gather behind them, junior officers and enlisted personnel waiting their turn at the checkpoint, watching the interaction with varying degrees of interest. Donovan made a show of checking his computer terminal, knowing full well he wouldn't find her name. This type showed up occasionally. People with mental health issues claiming connections to high-ranking officers, conspiracy theorists convinced the military housed aliens, former service members who couldn't let go of their past. "Not seeing your name anywhere, ma'am," he said, emphasizing the last word with barely concealed derision. Maybe you got confused about which base you were supposed to visit. Eleanor didn't move. Could you check again? It might be under Project Silverback. The mention of the classified project name sent a jolt through Donovan. Project Silverback wasn't common knowledge. It was a highly restricted research initiative that he only knew about because of security briefings. His suspicion deepened. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Where exactly did you hear that name? He demanded, his voice hardening as he signaled Miller to move to a flanking position. Security protocols for potential information breaches were clear. I worked on it, she said simply. 8 years ago, Major Lawrence requested my consultation. Donovan's laugh was harsh and deliberate, designed to put her in her place. Lady, Silverback is a specialized military project. They don't bring in consultants who look like they sleep under bridges. The waiting crowd had grown, drawn by the tension in Donovan's voice. Young soldiers watched with uncertainty, following the lead of their superiors. Several pulled out phones, sensing entertainment in the making. I understand your skepticism, Eleanor said, her voice remaining measured. But if you could just call Major Lawrence. I'm not bothering senior officers because some vagrant wandered in claiming to know classified information. Donovan cut her off. In fact, mentioning classified project names is a security violation. I'm going to need to search your bag. For the first time, Eleanor hesitated, her eyes darting to the growing audience. That's not necessary. I can just leave if there's a problem. Rodriguez stepped forward. Actually, ma'am, it is necessary now. Security protocol when unauthorized individuals mention classified projects. Eleanor's stance shifted subtly. Weight balanced evenly on both feet. Shoulders squared, hands relaxed but ready. The change was so minimal that most wouldn't notice. But Donovan had been trained to recognize combat readiness. Something about this woman wasn't adding up. Fine, she finally said, sliding the backpack from her shoulder. But I'd prefer this be done privately. Donovan took the bag, deliberately ignoring her request. This is a security checkpoint, ma'am. Nothing private about it. With theatrical flair designed to entertain his audience, Donovan upended the backpack over the metal table, sending its contents scattering across the surface. A few worn items of clothing tumbled out. Faded t-shirts, a pair of jeans with patches at the knees. A dog-eared paperback novel landed spine up. A plastic water bottle rolled to the edge of the table. Real military material here, Rodriguez commented loudly, picking up a threadbare sweater between two fingers as if it might be contaminated. The crowd had grown to nearly 20 people now, phones recording, whispers circulating. Eleanor stood motionless, her face expressionless as her meager possessions were displayed for public mockery. A weathered journal fell open, revealing pages filled with precise, technical drawings. Donovan flipped through it casually, pausing at sketches that looked like weapon schematics. Playing soldier and drawing pictures, he announced to the crowd. We've got ourselves a regular Pentagon consultant here. Young soldiers laughed nervously, following the lead of their superiors. Eleanor remained silent, her eyes tracking each person, each movement with unsettling precision. What's this supposed to be? Rodriguez asked, holding up a page with complex mathematical equations. The secret formula for military coffee? More laughter, growing bolder as Eleanor's silence was interpreted as submission or shame. Donovan continued rifling through her belongings, his movements growing more careless, more deliberately disrespectful. Staff Sergeant, a female lieutenant at the back of the crowd called out, her voice carrying a note of discomfort. Maybe that's enough. Donovan ignored her, turning the backpack upside down and shaking it to ensure nothing remained inside. As he did, something heavy struck the metal table with a distinctive sound that made several veterans in the crowd straighten instinctively. A small wooden box about 4 inches square slid across the table's surface before coming to rest against Eleanor's water bottle. The impact had caused its lid to pop open just enough to reveal a glimpse of blue ribbon with white stars. Eleanor moved then, reaching for the box with surprising speed, but Rodriguez intercepted her, snatching it up with a triumphant grin. What's this? Your lucky charm? He held the box up to the light, opening it fully to examine the contents. The morning sun caught the gold surface of the metal inside, creating a momentary flash of light that seemed to silence the entire checkpoint. Rodriguez's smile faltered as he stared at what he held, a 5-pointed gold star hanging from a light blue ribbon adorned with 13 white stars. An older contractor standing nearby inhaled sharply, taking an involuntary step forward. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, loud enough for those nearest to hear. Donovan, still uncomprehending, reached for the box. "Let me see whatever trinket she's carrying around." "Staff Sergeant," the contractor interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of someone who recognized what others didn't. "That's not a trinket." But Donovan was already holding the medal, turning it over in his hands with the same casual disrespect he'd shown everything else. "What? Did you buy this at an army surplus store?" he asked Eleanor, his voice still mocking, though less certain now. "Trying to play dress-up with real soldiers?" Eleanor's expression remained unchanged, but something in her posture had shifted, a coiling of potential energy, like a spring compressed to its limit. "Staff Sergeant Donovan," she said quietly, reading his name tape with eyes that shouldn't have been able to focus so clearly from her position. "I'd appreciate it if you'd handle that with care." The use of his name and rank startled him, but his pride wouldn't allow him to back down in front of an audience. "Oh, I'm sure you would," he replied, dangling the medal carelessly between two fingers. "Probably paid good money for this fake." A major who had been passing by stopped at the edge of the gathering, drawn by the growing tension. His eyes narrowed as he caught sight of what Donovan was holding. "Sergeant," he called sharply, "what exactly is happening here?" Donovan straightened reflexively at the sound of an officer's voice. "Just a security check, sir." Unauthorized civilian mentioned classified information. The major pushed through the crowd, his face growing increasingly concerned as he approached. "And that?" he asked, pointing at the medal in Donovan's hand. "Just some souvenir she was carrying, sir," Donovan answered, his certainty beginning to waver as he registered the major's expression. The major reached for the medal, taking it with a reverence that made Donovan's stomach tighten with the first threads of real doubt. "This," the major said, his voice carrying clearly to every person present, "is a Congressional Medal of Honor." The crowd's collective intake of breath sounded like wind through trees. Donovan's face drained of color as the implications crashed over him. "Sir," he began, "there's no way." The major cut him off with a look. "I've only seen 3 of these in my entire career. Sergeant?" He turned to Eleanor, studying her face with new intensity. "Ma'am, may I ask how you came to possess this?" Eleanor's gaze remained fixed on the medal. "It was awarded to me, Major." Rodriguez laughed, though the sound held more nervousness than mockery now. "Come on. Women weren't even in combat roles 8 years ago." The major's head snapped toward him. "Corporal, unless you've suddenly been promoted to chairman of the Joint Chiefs, I suggest you remain silent." He turned back to Eleanor, his demeanor shifting to something approaching deference. "Your name, ma'am?" "Eleanor Reeves," she answered quietly. "Though, that's not the name you'd find on the citation." Understanding dawned on the major's face, followed by a shock so profound it seemed to physically rock him backward. "Wait, are you Viper?" The single word electrified the atmosphere. Several veterans in the crowd straightened instinctively, as if standing at attention. The older contractor's mouth fell open in undisguised awe. Eleanor's only response was a slight incline of her head, neither confirming nor denying. Donovan looked between them in growing confusion and alarm. "Sir, what's going on? Who is Viper?" The major ignored him, focused entirely on Eleanor. "They told us you were dead," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "After Khalistan." The official report said what needed to be said. Eleanor interrupted, her voice carrying an authority that belied her appearance. "And I'd appreciate it if we could continue this conversation somewhere less public." The crowd had fallen completely silent, phones lowered as military discipline reasserted itself in the face of something momentous. The sense that they were witnessing history unfolding was palpable. "Of course," the major agreed immediately. "My office is—" His words were cut short by the arrival of a black SUV that pulled up to the checkpoint with the deliberate precision of someone expecting to be recognized. The rear door opened, and a silver-haired man in the uniform of a brigadier general stepped out. The entire checkpoint snapped to attention, including Eleanor, whose movement was so automatic it appeared to surprise even her. The general surveyed the scene, his experienced eyes taking in the scattered belongings, the medal in the major's hand, the rigid posture of the security personnel, and finally, Eleanor herself. His face, weathered by decades of service and responsibility, revealed nothing of his thoughts. "At ease," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who rarely needed to raise it to be obeyed. As the assembled personnel relaxed marginally, he approached Eleanor, stopping 3 feet away. "Captain," he said simply. Eleanor's spine straightened further, if that were possible. "It's just Ms. Reeves now, sir." The general's eyes softened almost imperceptibly. "Not to those of us who know what happened in Khalistan." He turned to address the major. "I'll take it from here, Phillips. Please escort Ms. Reeves to my office." His gaze swept over the scattered belongings. "And have someone collect her things with the respect they deserve." As the major moved to comply, the general's attention shifted to Donovan, who stood rigidly at attention, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Staff Sergeant," the general said, his tone conversational but carrying undertones that made Donovan's mouth go dry. "Do you know what you've been holding in your hands?" Donovan swallowed hard. "A Medal of Honor, sir." "Not just any Medal of Honor," the general corrected. "One of only 7 awarded during the Khalistan conflict. One that, until 10 minutes ago, I believed was buried with its recipient." He stepped closer, his voice dropping so that only Donovan and those nearest could hear. "Do you have any idea what Captain Reeves did to earn that medal?" Donovan's voice failed him completely. He managed only a slight shake of his head. "Neither do I," the general said, surprising everyone within earshot. "Because what happened during Operation Longshadow remains classified at the highest level. What I do know is that 37 men and women came home to their families because of her actions." He straightened, addressing the gathered crowd. "What you've witnessed here today doesn't leave this checkpoint. That's a direct order." His gaze returned to Donovan. "As for you, Staff Sergeant, report to my office at 1,400 hours. We'll discuss appropriate consequences for your actions today." With that, he turned and followed Eleanor and the major to the waiting SUV, leaving behind a checkpoint frozen in stunned silence. Rodriguez broke the spell first, collapsing onto a nearby chair as if his legs could no longer support him. "Holy shit," he whispered. "Do you know who that was?" Miller shook his head, his young face pale with the realization of what they'd just participated in. "That was General Harrington," the contractor supplied, his voice hushed with something approaching reverence. "Former commander of Special Operations Command, the man who oversaw the Khalistan conflict from beginning to end." Donovan remained rooted in place, staring at the metal box that the general had placed carefully on the table before departing. His entire worldview had been upended in the space of minutes, his certainties crumbling like sand castles at high tide. "And Viper?" Miller asked, the question directed at no one in particular. The contractor shook his head. "Just rumors. A ghost story they told us during deployment. An operator so effective the enemy put a price on her head equal to what they'd pay for a general." As the crowd slowly dispersed, Donovan found himself alone at the checkpoint, surrounded by the scattered belongings of a woman he'd humiliated without hesitation. With shaking hands, he began gathering her possessions, handling each item with the care he should have shown from the beginning. The journal fell open as he picked it up, revealing not weapon schematics as he'd assumed, but detailed prosthetic designs, annotated with measurements and material specifications. Only then did he remember Eleanor's odd gait, the slight unevenness in her stride that he'd attributed to weakness or injury. The full weight of his misjudgment pressed down on him like a physical force. He'd mocked a Medal of Honor recipient, someone who'd performed acts of valor so extraordinary they'd been deemed worthy of the nation's highest military decoration. As he carefully placed her belongings in the backpack, Donovan confronted the uncomfortable truth that he'd become everything he claimed to despise. Someone who judged worth based on appearance rather than character, who valued the polished surface over the substance beneath. The checkpoint remained quiet for the rest of the morning, the usual banter replaced by a somber reflection that felt like the aftermath of a natural disaster. Something fundamental had shifted in their understanding of the world, and there would be no going back to the comfortable certainties of before. In the distance, the flag continued to snap in the breeze, its colors somehow more vivid against the clear blue sky, as if even it stood straighter in the presence of unrecognized heroism. The marble hallways of the brigade headquarters echoed with whispers as Eleanor Reeves walked alongside Major Phillips, her posture military straight despite her civilian clothes. The contrast between her worn appearance and the reverence with which the major treated her created a visual dissonance that drew stares from everyone they passed. "I never thought I'd see you again," Phillips said quietly, keeping pace with her measured stride. "After Khalistan, the report said you'd been killed in action. There was a memorial service at Arlington." Eleanor's eyes remained forward, her expression carefully neutral. For all intents and purposes, Eleanor Hawkins did die in Khalistan. Eleanor Reeves is just someone trying to live a quiet life. Phillips digested this, his professional composure wavering. "But the Medal of Honor. Why carry it if you're trying to disappear?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Some things you don't leave behind, Major, no matter how much you might want to." They reached General Harrington's office, an austere room that reflected its occupant's preference for functionality over ostentation. The general stood by the window, gazing out at the parade grounds where a company of soldiers performed drill exercises with machine-like precision. "Thank you, Major," he said without turning. "That will be all." Phillips hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave. "Sir, with respect, if this is about Operation Long Shadow—" "It's not," Eleanor interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "It's about Project Silverback. You're not cleared for that discussion." The major's eyebrows rose in surprise, but military discipline prevailed. He nodded sharply and left, closing the door behind him. General Harrington turned from the window, studying Eleanor with eyes that had witnessed the full spectrum of human capability, from extraordinary courage to unfathomable cruelty. At 62, his face mapped decades of difficult decisions, yet he carried himself with the vitality of a man 20 years younger. "You look like hell, Captain," he said finally, the gruffness in his tone unable to mask the underlying concern. "Not Captain anymore," Eleanor reminded him, easing herself into a chair without waiting for permission. A flicker of discomfort crossed her features as she adjusted her position. Harrington's gaze dropped to her leg. "The prosthetic giving you trouble?" "Nothing I can't handle." She straightened, meeting his eyes directly. "Let's skip the small talk, General. Why did Lawrence request my presence at a facility I'm not supposed to know exists, working on a project I'm not supposed to remember?" Harrington settled into his chair with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years. "Because Project Silverback has reached Phase 3, and the problems we're encountering mirror the ones you predicted in your original assessment." Eleanor's expression darkened. "I told you 8 years ago that weaponizing the Lazarus Protocol was reckless. The human trials should never have been approved." "We didn't have a choice," Harrington countered, leaning forward. "When the Chinese demonstrated their capabilities during the Taiwan crisis, the Joint Chiefs pushed for accelerated development. The President authorized full-spectrum testing. And now you're seeing the neurological degradation I warned about," Eleanor stated rather than asked. Harrington nodded grimly. 3 test subjects have experienced catastrophic synaptic collapse. 2 more are showing early signs of the same pattern. He slid a tablet across the desk. "Lawrence believes you might be able to help mitigate the effects." Eleanor didn't touch the device. "I was clear in my final report. The protocol is fundamentally flawed. Human neural architecture can't handle the kind of processing power you're trying to integrate. It's like trying to run industrial machinery through household wiring." "And yet you managed it," Harrington said quietly. 5 years of field deployment with no signs of degradation. A bitter smile crossed Eleanor's face. "Is that what my medical file says? No degradation?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "General, I haven't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch in 8 years. I can't be in crowds without mapping exit strategies and threat assessments. I remember every detail of every operation with perfect clarity, including watching my team die while I calculated exactly how many of them I could save based on statistical probability." She tapped her temple. The Lazarus Protocol didn't enhance my humanity. It stripped it away until all that was left was the mission. And now you want me to help you do that to others? Harrington's weathered face showed genuine regret. What I want doesn't matter, Captain. National security does. The Chinese have deployed their augmented operators in at least 3 confirmed theaters. Intelligence suggests the Russians aren't far behind. Eleanor's laugh held no humor. The same justification as 8 years ago. An arms race with no finish line. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. A young lieutenant entered, carrying Eleanor's backpack with the careful reverence of someone handling sacred artifacts. "Sir, the items you requested," she said, placing the backpack on a side table before retreating with a curious glance at Eleanor. Once the door closed, Harrington continued. "Lawrence believes the degradation issue can be solved with recalibration of the neural interface. Your expertise in both the technical and experiential aspects makes you uniquely qualified to assist." Eleanor rose and crossed to her backpack, checking its contents with quick efficiency. The Medal of Honor box was placed prominently on top, handled with obvious care. She closed the bag without comment and turned back to Harrington. "And if I refuse?" The general's expression remained impassive. "Then we continue without you, likely losing more test subjects in the process." "Emotional manipulation, General?" "I expected better." "Not manipulation, reality." Harrington stood, moving to a wall safe hidden behind a landscape painting. He entered a complex code and removed a thick file stamped with multiple classification warnings. "Before you decide, there's something you should see." He placed the file on the desk and slid it toward her. The cover bore a single word that made Eleanor's carefully controlled expression falter. "Silverfish." "That's not possible," she whispered, all pretense of detachment vanishing. "Silverfish was terminated after Khalistan. All research destroyed." "Officially, yes." Harrington's voice carried the weight of secrets too heavy to bear alone. Unofficially, the program continued under different management. Different objectives. Eleanor opened the file with hands that betrayed the slightest tremor. Photographs spilled across the desk. Surveillance images of men and women in various settings, each marked with a small silver fish icon in the corner. What caught her attention, however, were their eyes. Flat, emotionless, with a focus that seemed inhuman in its intensity. "How many?" she asked, her voice barely audible. 27 deployed operatives. Unlike you, they weren't volunteers." Eleanor's head snapped up. "Meaning what, exactly?" "Meaning they didn't have your psychological profile or ethical framework. Meaning they didn't receive the modified protocol you helped design." Harrington's face aged 10 years as he spoke. "Meaning they're experiencing none of the empathy preservation measures you insisted on for the original program. They're creating sociopaths," Eleanor stated flatly. "They're creating weapons," Harrington corrected, "and deploying them domestically." The implication hung in the air between them. Eleanor shuffled through more photographs. Surveillance of political rallies, corporate headquarters, university campuses. In each image, one of the silver-marked individuals could be spotted in the crowd, watching, assessing. "Who authorized this?" she demanded, her voice hardening into something that made even Harrington straighten instinctively. "That's what we're trying to determine. The program exists off-books, funded through channels even I can't trace." Eleanor closed the file with deliberate care. "And you want me to help with Project Silverback as what? A counterbalance?" "I want you to help us understand what makes you different," Harrington said. "Why you survived the full integration when others didn't. Why you maintained your humanity when our current subjects are losing theirs." Eleanor stood silently for a long moment, conflict evident in every line of her body. Finally, she spoke. "I'll meet with Lawrence, review the current protocols. That's all I'm committing to for now." Relief crossed Harrington's face before military discipline reasserted control. "Thank you, Captain." "Eleanor," she corrected automatically. "I haven't been Captain Hawkins for a long time." Harrington nodded, accepting the boundary. "There's a vehicle waiting to take you to the research wing." Major Phillips will escort you. As Eleanor turned to leave, Harrington added, "For what it's worth, I fought against terminating your status after Khalistan. What they did to you was unconscionable." Eleanor paused at the door. "What happened in Khalistan was a consequence of choices I made, General. Just like the choices you're making now." Her eyes, sharper than seemed natural, fixed on his. "I hope you're prepared for the consequences of creating more people like me." The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow carried more finality than a slam would have. Outside in the hallway, Major Phillips waited at a respectful distance. His face registered surprise when Eleanor emerged sooner than expected. "Ms. Reeves, I'm to escort you to the research wing," he said, falling into step beside her. Eleanor noticed the change in his demeanor, the subtle shift from cautious respect to something approaching awe. News traveled fast on military bases, especially news involving legends come to life. "Has the general briefed you on my purpose here?" she asked as they navigated the labyrinthine hallways of the headquarters building. "No, ma'am. Only that you're consulting on a classified project." Phillips hesitated, then added, quote, "But rumors are already circulating about what happened at the checkpoint." Eleanor's mouth tightened. Unfortunate, but not unexpected. They exited the building into bright sunlight. Eleanor paused, scanning the parade grounds where troops continued their drills, their movements synchronized to shouted cadence. For a moment her expression softened with something like nostalgia. "Do you miss it?" Phillips asked, following her gaze. "The structure, the purpose." "Parts of it," Eleanor admitted, "but not the parts most people think." She resumed walking toward the waiting vehicle. "I miss the clarity, knowing exactly where I stood in the world." Phillips opened the car door for her. "If you don't mind my asking, why did you leave? After receiving the Medal of Honor, you could have written your own ticket in the service." Eleanor's laugh held genuine amusement for the first time. "Is that what the official story says? That I left voluntarily?" Before Phillips could respond, Staff Sergeant Donovan approached at a brisk pace, his face set in lines of determined contrition. Eleanor tensed slightly, her posture shifting to something more defensive. "Ms. Reeves," Donovan called, stopping at a respectful distance. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Phillips moved to intercept him. "Staff Sergeant, this isn't the time or place." "It's all right, Major," Eleanor said, studying Donovan with clinical detachment. "What is it, Sergeant?" Donovan stood at rigid attention, his eyes fixed on a point above Eleanor's head, the posture of a soldier expecting disciplinary action. "Ma'am, I want to apologize for my conduct at the checkpoint. My behavior was unprofessional and unbecoming of a non-commissioned officer." The formal apology, clearly rehearsed, hung in the air between them. Eleanor's expression remained neutral, offering neither absolution nor condemnation. "Why are you apologizing, Sergeant?" she asked finally. The question seemed to catch Donovan off guard. "Ma'am? Are you apologizing because I turned out to be someone important? Someone with a medal and connections to generals?" Eleanor's voice remained calm, but carried an edge that made Phillips shift uncomfortably. "Would you be here apologizing if I were just the homeless woman you thought I was?" Donovan's composure cracked. I don't know, ma'am. At least you're honest about that." Eleanor adjusted her backpack. "Here's something to consider, Sergeant. Every person who comes through your checkpoint deserves the same respect, not because of who they might secretly be, but because of who they are as human beings." She stepped closer, her voice dropping so that only Donovan could hear her next words. "The woman sleeping under the bridge downtown who served 2 tours in Iraq? The man with PTSD panhandling outside the VA who earned a Silver Star in Afghanistan? They deserve the same treatment you'd give a general, because they earned it the same way, by putting on the uniform you're currently disgracing." Donovan flinched as if physically struck, but held his position. "Yes, ma'am." "Don't apologize to me, Sergeant," Eleanor said, stepping back. "Apologize to the next veteran you see who doesn't meet your standards of what a hero should look like. Better yet, help them instead." With that, she turned and entered the waiting vehicle, leaving Donovan standing rigidly at attention in the parking lot. As the car pulled away, Phillips glanced at Eleanor with newfound respect. That was merciful in its way. Eleanor gazed out the window at the passing scenery of Fort Kessler, the orderly barracks, the troops moving with purpose, the flag flying proudly against the blue sky. No, it wasn't. It was necessary. There's a difference. The vehicle turned onto a restricted access road leading to a section of the base few personnel ever saw. High fences topped with razor wire surrounded a complex of low, windowless buildings. Armed guards checked their credentials twice before allowing them to proceed to the innermost security perimeter. "Have you been to this facility before?" Eleanor asked as they approached a final checkpoint. Phillips shook his head. "No, my clearance was upgraded temporarily just for this escort duty." He hesitated, then added, "Whatever you're working on must be important." "Or dangerous," Eleanor replied quietly. The final security check was more thorough: retinal scans, fingerprints, and a full-body millimeter wave scan that could detect the smallest anomaly beneath clothing. Eleanor submitted to the procedures with the patience of someone familiar with extreme security protocols. As they waited for clearance, a commotion erupted at another entrance to the facility. A medical team rushed out, surrounding a gurney being rapidly wheeled toward a waiting ambulance. The patient was strapped down, convulsing violently, despite heavy restraints. Eleanor moved with surprising speed to the window, watching the scene with intense focus. Even from a distance, she could see the patient's eyes. Wide open, darting in patterns too rapid and precise to be natural. "Neural cascade failure," she murmured, almost to herself. Phillips joined her at the window. "What's happening to him?" "His brain is trying to process too much information simultaneously," Eleanor explained, her clinical tone at odds with the compassion in her eyes. "Imagine running a supercomputer's operating system on outdated hardware. Eventually, it overheats and shuts down." The ambulance doors closed and the vehicle sped away, sirens blaring. Eleanor watched it go, her expression unreadable. "Is that what Project Silverback does?" Phillips asked quietly. "Turns people into supercomputers?" Eleanor turned to him, studying his face with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. "Major, a word of advice. Don't ask questions about things you're not cleared to know. In this facility, curiosity isn't just discouraged, it's dangerous." Before he could respond, the security officer returned with their clearance. "Ms. Reeves, you're authorized to proceed." "Major Phillips, you'll wait in the reception area." Phillips nodded, accustomed to the compartmentalization of classified information. "Good luck with whatever you're doing here, Ms. Reeves." Eleanor shouldered her backpack. "Luck has nothing to do with what happens in this place, Major. Never has." With that cryptic statement, she followed the security officer through a series of heavy doors that sealed behind them with pneumatic hisses. The reception area where Phillips remained held nothing but uncomfortable chairs and outdated magazines. The universal waiting room, designed to reveal nothing about what lay beyond. Beyond the security doors, the true nature of the facility revealed itself. Gone were the traditional military aesthetics, replaced by the sterile environment of a high-tech research laboratory. Staff in white lab coats moved purposefully through corridors lined with observation rooms. Through reinforced windows, Eleanor glimpsed test subjects performing tasks with unnatural precision, assembling complex mechanisms blindfolded, memorizing pages of random numbers with a single glance, solving mathematical equations that filled entire whiteboards. "Captain Hawkins," a voice called from behind her, using the name she'd abandoned years ago. Or should I say, Eleanor Reeves now. Eleanor turned to face a tall, thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the distracted air of someone whose mind operated on multiple tracks simultaneously. Dr. Aaron Lawrence had aged since she'd last seen him. His hair now completely gray, new lines etched around his eyes, but his intense gaze remained unchanged. "Dr. Lawrence," she acknowledged with a nod that was neither friendly nor hostile. "Still playing God with other people's brains, I see." Lawrence's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Still direct to the point of rudeness, I see. Some things the Lazarus Protocol couldn't enhance." "Or some things it couldn't eliminate," Eleanor countered, "which seems to be your current problem." Lawrence gestured for her to follow him deeper into the facility. "Harrington briefed you then. Enough to know you're experiencing exactly the neural degradation I predicted in my final report." They entered Lawrence's office, a space dominated by monitors displaying brain scans, neural network models, and lines of code that scrolled too quickly for normal human comprehension. The same report you dismissed as overly cautious, if I recall correctly. Lawrence settled behind his desk, indicating a chair for Eleanor. Science requires risk, Captain. You know that better than most. Science requires ethics, Doctor, Eleanor replied, remaining standing. Something this program has always been short on. Lawrence's expression hardened. Ethics are a luxury in an arms race. The Chinese program is 2 generations ahead of where we expected them to be. Their augmented operators have demonstrated capabilities that exceed even your performance metrics. And how many of their test subjects have they burned through to achieve those results? Eleanor asked. How many minds have they destroyed? That's precisely why we need you, Lawrence said, leaning forward. You're the only subject who successfully integrated the full Lazarus protocol without catastrophic neural degradation. We need to understand why. Eleanor placed her backpack on his desk with deliberate care. You need to understand why I haven't ended up like that poor soldier I just saw being carried out on a stretcher. Lawrence had the grace to look uncomfortable. Lieutenant Rivera. 3rd case of cascade failure this month. Let me guess, you've been pushing the integration parameters. Trying to achieve faster processing, higher retention, improved predictive modeling. The mission parameters require it, Lawrence defended. No, your timetables require it, Eleanor corrected sharply. Your funding reviews and demonstration schedules require it. Don't confuse administrative pressure with mission necessity. She pulled out her journal from the backpack, flipping to a specific page covered in neurological diagrams that would have been at home in an advanced medical textbook. The Lazarus protocol works by creating artificial neural pathways that bypass the brain's natural processing limitations, but those pathways aren't integrated into the existing architecture. They're overlaid. Lawrence nodded reluctantly. Which creates competition for resources between the augmented and natural systems. Exactly, Eleanor confirmed. The human brain wasn't designed to process information the way you're forcing it to. Eventually, the systems conflict and cascade failure begins. She tapped her temple. I'm living on borrowed time myself, have been for years. Lawrence's expression shifted to one of genuine scientific curiosity, yet you've survived longer than any other subject. 8 years of full integration without terminal degradation. Why? Eleanor's smile held no humor. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The one worth dragging me back into a world I left behind. She pulled a small device from her pocket, something that resembled a medical sensor, and placed it against her temple. A holographic display appeared above it, showing a 3-dimensional model of a human brain with certain areas highlighted in pulsing red. This is a standard brain augmented with the Lazarus protocol, she explained, manipulating the image to zoom in on specific regions. And this is mine. The image shifted, revealing subtle but significant differences, additional connections between regions, unique pathway configurations that defied standard neurological architecture. Lawrence leaned forward, his scientific fascination overriding all other concerns. That's impossible. The human brain doesn't form connections like that naturally. No, Eleanor agreed. It doesn't. Understanding dawned on Lawrence's face. You modified the protocol. I adapted, Eleanor corrected. After Khalistan, when the cascade failures began, I realized what was happening. The artificial pathways were competing with natural ones, so I found a way to create integration points, bridges between the systems. Without authorization, Lawrence stated, though his tone held more admiration than accusation. Without your authorization, Eleanor confirmed. But with the help of someone who understood the risks better than you ever did. Lawrence's expression darkened. Dr. Carlyle. Eleanor nodded. Before you had him removed from the program, he helped me develop a modified integration protocol, one that worked with the brain's natural architecture instead of overriding it. A protocol you never shared with the program, Lawrence noted, his tone sharpening. A protocol I was never given the chance to share, Eleanor countered. Or have you forgotten that immediately after Khalistan, I was declared dead and removed from active service? The accusation hung between them, neither confirmed nor denied. Lawrence finally broke the silence. So you've been self-administering modifications to the protocol for 8 years, without supervision, without medical support, without becoming a laboratory specimen, you mean? Eleanor's voice remained steady, but carried an undercurrent of steel. Yes, and I've documented everything. She patted her journal. Every adjustment, every side effect, every breakthrough. Lawrence stared at the journal with the hunger of a scientist presented with the key to a puzzle he'd spent years trying to solve. We need that data. You need more than data, Eleanor said, closing the journal. You need to understand that the Lazarus Protocol isn't just about enhancing cognitive function. It's about reshaping what it means to be human. And that's not something that can be rushed, standardized, or mass-produced. She leaned forward, fixing Lawrence with a stare that seemed to see through him. I'll help you redesign the protocol to prevent more cascade failures. I'll even help rehabilitate the subjects who haven't reached terminal degradation. But I want something in return. Name it, Lawrence said without hesitation. Project Silverfish, Eleanor stated flatly. I want everything you have on it. And I want access to any monitoring systems tracking their operatives. Lawrence's expression closed immediately. That's not my program. I don't have authority. Don't lie to me, Doctor, Eleanor interrupted, her voice dropping to a dangerous softness. You designed the original neural architecture for both programs. You know exactly what Silverfish is doing with your work. The tension between them grew palpable, two formidable intellects locked in silent calculation. Finally, Lawrence sighed. I can give you access to the monitoring data, he conceded. But that's all. Silverfish operates under different authority structures. That's a start, Eleanor said, rising to her feet. Now show me your current subjects. I need to assess how far the degradation has progressed in each case. As they left the office, Lawrence asked the question that had clearly been bothering him since her arrival. Why did you keep the medal, Eleanor? If you were trying to disappear, why carry something so definitively tied to your former identity? Eleanor paused, considering the question with the same methodical thoroughness she applied to everything. Because it wasn't awarded to me, she said finally. It was awarded to the men and women who died in Khalistan. I'm just its caretaker, until the truth can be told. Lawrence's brow furrowed. The official citation credits you alone with the action. The official citation is a lie, Eleanor replied simply. Like so many things in this business, they continued down the sterile corridor, their footsteps echoing against metal and concrete, the sound of two people walking a path paved with secrets toward a future neither could fully predict. The observation room hummed with the quiet tension of controlled catastrophe. Through a one-way glass wall, Eleanor watched as a young woman, no more than 25, attempted to complete what should have been a simple cognitive exercise. Instead, the soldier's hands trembled violently as she tried to assemble a puzzle designed to test spatial reasoning. Sweat beaded on her forehead, despite the room's carefully regulated temperature. Lieutenant Jessica Ramsey, Dr. Lawrence said, consulting a tablet. 26 years old. Special Forces qualified. 3 combat deployments before volunteering for the program. Integration date was 11 months ago. Eleanor studied the woman with eyes that saw beyond ordinary perception. The slight arrhythmic movement in Ramsey's right hand, the microtremors around her left eye, the way she would occasionally freeze completely, as if processing invisible data. She's experiencing temporal dissonance, Eleanor observed. Her brain is processing information faster than her motor functions can respond. Lawrence nodded. We've observed similar symptoms in all remaining subjects. The disconnect between cognitive speed and physical capability creates a bottleneck effect. It's more than a bottleneck, Eleanor corrected. It's a fundamental misalignment of systems. The augmented neural pathways are trying to operate at maximum efficiency, while the natural pathways maintain normal human limitations. She pulled out her journal, quickly sketching a neural map with annotations that would have challenged most neurosurgeons to comprehend. You're approaching this all wrong. You're trying to override the brain's natural architecture instead of working with it. Lawrence leaned closer, studying her drawings. The original protocol was designed to create superior performance, not compatibility. And that's why your subjects are dying, Eleanor said flatly. You can't brute force human evolution, Doctor. The brain develops through a complex interaction of genetics, environment, and experience. You're trying to shortcut millions of years of development in a matter of months. Through the glass, Lieutenant Ramsey suddenly stopped moving, her eyes widening as she stared at nothing. A moment later, she began reciting complex mathematical equations at a pace barely comprehensible to normal hearing. Algorithmic dumping, Eleanor noted. Her brain is trying to offload excess processing to reduce system stress. Lawrence made a note on his tablet. We've seen this behavior increase in frequency over the past 2 weeks. It typically precedes a cascade event. Eleanor's expression hardened. How many subjects have you lost already? 7 terminal cases, Lawrence admitted reluctantly. 3 more in critical condition. 15 showing early signs of degradation, like Ramsey. And how many stable integrations? Lawrence's silence was answer enough. Eleanor turned away from the observation window, disgust evident in every line of her body. You rushed deployment without solving the fundamental compatibility issues. Now you're burning through good soldiers to meet artificial deadlines. The Chinese program doesn't have these limitations, Lawrence countered defensively. You don't know what limitations the Chinese program has, Eleanor shot back. You only know what their propaganda tells you. For all you know, they're incinerating failed subjects by the dozens to hide their failure rate. She returned to the observation window, her expression softening as she watched Ramsey struggle to complete her task. She's fighting it, using compartmentalization techniques to manage the cognitive overflow. Can you help her? Lawrence asked, a rare note of genuine concern in his voice. Eleanor was silent for a long moment, calculations and probabilities running through her mind with inhuman speed. Possibly. I'll need access to the integration parameters for each subject. Complete medical histories, neural mapping from before and after integration. That's highly classified material, Lawrence began, but Eleanor cut him off. So is the existence of a program that's killing American soldiers in the name of progress, she said coldly. Choose your battle, Doctor. Lawrence studied her face, weighing options and consequences. Finally, he nodded. I'll get you everything we have, but I need something in return. I'm already helping you fix your broken program, Eleanor reminded him. I need to understand your modifications, Lawrence pressed. The self-administered protocol changes that have kept you functional for 8 years. Eleanor smiled without humor. That information comes at a higher price than you're prepared to pay. Name it, Lawrence challenged. The truth about Khalistan, Eleanor said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The real mission parameters. The real reason 11 soldiers died while I survived. Lawrence's face drained of color. That's not my information to share. Then my modifications aren't yours to have, Eleanor replied simply. She turned back to the observation window, where Ramsey had finally managed to complete the puzzle, though her hands still trembled uncontrollably. Let's start with her. She's the closest to cascade failure but still showing cognitive organization. Lawrence hesitated, then nodded sharply. I'll arrange it. And Eleanor? He paused, choosing his words carefully. Not everyone agreed with how Khalistan was handled. Some of us fought against the official narrative. Quote, Yet here we are, Eleanor observed, still living with the consequences of decisions made by people who never have to face them. Hours later, Eleanor sat in a secure medical bay, surrounded by holographic displays showing Lieutenant Ramsey's neural activity in real time. The young officer lay on an examination table, electrodes attached to her temples and spine, eyes closed but clearly conscious. Lieutenant, Eleanor said, keeping her voice calm and measured, I'm going to ask you to perform a series of mental exercises. These may feel strange or difficult, but they're designed to help recalibrate your neural pathways. Ramsey's eyes opened, focusing on Eleanor with the intensity characteristic of augmented subjects. You're like me, she said, her voice carrying the slight mechanical quality of someone speaking while processing multiple thought streams simultaneously. But different. More integrated. Yes, Eleanor confirmed simply. I underwent an earlier version of the procedure you received. They said you were dead, Ramsey continued, information processing visibly behind her eyes. Operation Long Shadow. Medal of Honor. Captain Eleanor Hawkins, presumed killed in action during the Khalistan conflict. Eleanor's expression remained professionally neutral despite the jolt of hearing her former identity recited like a case file. Focus on your current situation, Lieutenant. Your neural pathways are experiencing accelerated degradation. Without intervention, you'll face cascade failure within approximately 72 hours. Ramsey absorbed this information with the detached analysis of someone whose emotional responses had been partially overridden by augmented logical processing. Terminal prognosis. Is intervention possible? That's what we're going to find out. Eleanor adjusted several parameters on the monitoring equipment. I want you to close your eyes and visualize a simple geometric shape, a cube. Hold that image in your mind. Ramsey complied, her eyelids flickering as her enhanced brain rendered the requested visualization with perfect precision. On the neural monitors, activity spiked in multiple regions simultaneously. Now, I want you to allow the cube to rotate slowly, Eleanor instructed. Don't force it. Just let it move naturally. The monitors showed chaotic patterns as Ramsey's augmented pathways attempted to calculate exact rotational physics, while her natural pathways tried to create a more intuitive visualization. You're trying too hard, Eleanor noted. The augmentation pushes you toward precision, but sometimes approximation is more efficient. Let go of the perfect model and allow for imprecision. Ramsey's brow furrowed. Imprecision reduces operational effectiveness. Imprecision conserves neural resources, Eleanor countered. Not every task requires maximum processing power. For the next hour, Eleanor guided Ramsey through increasingly complex mental exercises, each designed to create bridges between her augmented and natural neural systems. Gradually, the chaotic patterns on the monitors began to show subtle signs of harmonization. Dr. Lawrence observed from the corner, his scientific curiosity evident despite his attempt at professional detachment. You're teaching her to manually regulate integration levels, he noted. Creating conscious control over processes designed to be automatic. The automatic regulation is what's failing, Eleanor explained, not taking her eyes off the monitors. The protocol forces constant maximum performance when the human brain evolved to operate at variable levels of efficiency based on need. She adjusted another parameter, watching as Ramsey's neural activity responded. The brain needs rest periods, downtime for maintenance and integration of new information. Your protocol overrides those natural cycles. The goal was constant peak performance, Lawrence defended. And how's that working out for your subjects? Eleanor asked pointedly, gesturing toward Ramsey's trembling form. After 3 hours of intensive work, Eleanor finally stepped back from the monitors. Ramsey lay exhausted but noticeably calmer, her tremors reduced to occasional twitches. What did you do? Lawrence asked, examining the readings with undisguised fascination. I taught her to create neural firewalls, Eleanor explained, making notes in her journal. Segmentation boundaries that allow her to isolate augmented functions from natural ones when necessary. She turned to Ramsey. Lieutenant, how do you feel? Clearer, Ramsey replied after a moment's consideration. Like, background noise has been reduced. That's the first step, Eleanor told her. You'll need to practice the techniques we worked on. Mental partitioning isn't a natural function. It requires conscious effort until the pathways are established. Ramsey sat up slowly, caution evident in her movements. Will this prevent cascade failure? No, Eleanor answered honestly, but it will buy you time while we develop a more permanent solution. As Ramsey was escorted back to her quarters by medical staff, Lawrence turned to Eleanor with renewed respect. That was remarkable. You've given her weeks, possibly months, that she wouldn't have had otherwise. Don't confuse a bandage with a cure, Eleanor cautioned, gathering her notes. All I've done is teach her how to manage symptoms. The underlying neural conflict remains. Lawrence escorted her through the facility's maze-like corridors toward a secure conference room. We've assembled the files you requested, complete histories on all 25 subjects, plus the integration parameters for each procedure. The conference room contained a long table covered with tablets, each containing thousands of pages of classified data. Eleanor surveyed the information with a calculated gaze, already processing patterns invisible to normal perception. "I'll need privacy," she stated, rather than requested. "And unrestricted system access." Lawrence hesitated. "System access requires authorization beyond my clearance level." Eleanor fixed him with a stare that made him involuntarily step back. "Then get it. Otherwise, you are asking me to perform surgery with my hands tied behind my back." "I'll see what I can arrange," Lawrence conceded, moving toward the door. He paused before leaving. "Eleanor, whatever you think of me or this program, know that I never intended these outcomes. Science sometimes has costs we can't predict." "Science doesn't have costs, Doctor," Eleanor replied without looking up from the tablets. "Scientists make choices. There's a difference." Alone in the conference room, Eleanor worked with inhuman focus, absorbing and analyzing data at speeds that would have been impossible without her augmentations. Hours passed unnoticed as she constructed a comprehensive model of the program's failures and potential solutions. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. She looked up to find Staff Sergeant Donovan standing awkwardly in the doorway, holding a tray with food and coffee. "Dr. Lawrence thought you might need this," he explained, carefully setting the tray on the edge of the table. "You've been in here for 14 hours straight." Eleanor blinked, her augmented mind recalibrating to normal human interaction after the deep focus of her analysis. "Thank you, Sergeant." Donovan lingered, clearly wanting to say more but uncertain how to proceed. Eleanor sighed internally, recognizing the familiar signs of someone struggling with guilt. "Something on your mind, Sergeant?" she prompted, reaching for the coffee. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" he asked, falling back on military formality as a shield. "We're not in a chain of command relationship, Sergeant. You don't need my permission." Donovan straightened his posture nonetheless. "I wanted to thank you for what you said earlier, about respect not being conditional on someone's appearance or status." Eleanor studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. "Words are easy, Sergeant. Actions matter more." "Yes, ma'am," he acknowledged. "Which is why I've been thinking about what you said regarding veterans who don't meet the hero image." He hesitated, then continued with growing confidence. "I've been at Fort Kessler for 8 years. In that time, I've turned away dozens of veterans who didn't have proper credentials or who seemed troubled. I never considered what they might be carrying." "And now?" Eleanor prompted. "Now I'm wondering how many medals I never saw because I was too busy judging books by their covers." His honesty carried the raw edge of someone confronting uncomfortable truths about themselves. Eleanor set down her coffee, giving him her full attention for the first time. "Self-awareness is the beginning of change, Sergeant, not the end." "I know, ma'am." Donovan squared his shoulders, which is why I've spoken with General Harrington about establishing a veteran outreach program at Fort Kessler, using base resources to help struggling veterans in the community. Surprise flickered briefly across Eleanor's features. "That's commendable, Sergeant." "It's necessary," Donovan corrected, echoing her earlier words. "I can't undo my past actions, but I can change my future ones." Eleanor nodded, a hint of genuine approval showing through her professional demeanor. "The General approved this idea?" "Provisionally," Donovan confirmed, "pending a formal proposal and implementation plan." "Good," Eleanor said simply. She gestured to the mountains of data surrounding her. "Now, if there's nothing else, I have 25 lives to try and save." Donovan recognized the dismissal and turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Ma'am, may I ask one question? About Khalistan?" Eleanor's expression closed immediately. "No, you may not." "Not about the operation itself," Donovan clarified quickly. "Just, how do you carry it? Whatever happened there, whatever choices you had to make, how do you live with it day to day?" The question hung in the air between them, from one soldier to another, stripped of rank and circumstance. Eleanor considered it with the same thorough analysis she applied to everything, weighing truth against comfort, honesty against protection. "You don't carry it, Sergeant," she finally answered. "It carries you. The best you can do is choose what direction it takes you." Donovan absorbed her words, nodding slowly. "Thank you, ma'am." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Alone again, Eleanor returned to her work with renewed determination. The conversation had stirred memories she usually kept carefully compartmentalized. The weight of decisions made in moments that defined not just lives but souls. Hours later, a soft alert from one of the tablets interrupted her concentration. A message had appeared on a secure channel containing a single line of text. Silverfish activated. Operation Blacklight commencing. Eleanor's focus shifted instantly. She accessed the monitoring systems Lawrence had reluctantly provided, pulling up real-time tracking data on Silverfish operatives. 27 signals pulsed on a map of the United States, each one representing an augmented operator with minimal ethical constraints. As she watched, the signals began converging on 3 locations: Washington, D.C., New York City, and Fort Kessler itself. The implications sent a cold wave of calculation through her enhanced mind, probabilities and scenarios unfolding with perfect clarity. She was reaching for the secure phone to alert Harrington when the door opened. General Harrington himself entered, his face grave, followed by Dr. Lawrence and 2 armed security personnel. "Captain Hawkins," Harrington said formally, using her old rank and name. "We have a situation." Eleanor gestured to the tablet displaying the Silverfish tracking data. "I'm aware, General. Operation Blacklight has been activated without authorization." Harrington's eyebrows rose slightly. "You've been busy." "That's why you brought me here," Eleanor reminded him. "To see what others miss." The general nodded to the security personnel, who took positions on either side of the door. "What you're seeing is a coordinated deployment of Silverfish operators against multiple high-value targets. We believe this is an attempted coup by elements within our own government." Eleanor processed this without visible reaction, though her mind raced through implications and contingencies. Which elements? "That's still unclear," Lawrence interjected. "But the activation codes came from within the Defense Intelligence Agency." "Not just from within," Harrington added grimly. "From the director's office itself." Eleanor absorbed this, calculating probabilities with inhuman speed. "General Corrigan authorized this?" "That's what we need to determine," Harrington said. "If Corrigan has gone rogue, we're facing a national security threat of unprecedented proportions. If someone has compromised his systems, we need to identify and neutralize them immediately." He fixed Eleanor with a gaze that carried the weight of command. "Captain, I'm officially reactivating your commission under Emergency Protocol 7. We need your unique capabilities." Eleanor remained still, her expression unreadable. "My unique capabilities are what got 11 good soldiers killed in Khalistan, General." "Your unique capabilities are what prevented a massacre," Harrington countered. "And they may be the only thing that prevents one now." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "I know what really happened in Khalistan, Eleanor. I know the choice you were forced to make. I know why you've been carrying that medal all these years." Surprise flickered briefly across Eleanor's face, a rare break in her carefully maintained control. "How?" "Because I was there," Harrington revealed quietly. "Not physically, but I was monitoring the operation. I heard everything over the comms. I know that when Command ordered you to sacrifice those civilians to complete your mission, you refused. I know that when they sent the team to eliminate you for that refusal, you saved them instead." Eleanor's composure cracked further, raw emotion showing through for the first time. "Then you know I failed. The civilians died anyway. My team died anyway. I made the wrong choice." "No," Harrington said with quiet certainty. "You made the only choice a soldier with honor could make. You chose to protect both the innocent and your brothers in arms, even at the cost of your own life." He gestured to the tablet showing the converging Silverfish signals. "And now I'm asking you to make another choice. 27 augmented operators with no ethical constraints are moving into position to execute Operation Blacklight. Their targets include the President, the Joint Chiefs, and key military installations. The weight of the moment hung between them, history poised to repeat itself in new and terrible ways. "What do you need from me?" Eleanor asked finally. "Your expertise in the Lazarus Protocol," Lawrence answered. "If we can understand how you maintain control over your augmentations, we might be able to develop a countermeasure against the Silverfish operators." "And in the meantime?" Eleanor pressed. Harrington's expression hardened with military precision. "In the meantime, we need someone who can match their capabilities." Someone who understands how they think, how they operate, and how to neutralize them if necessary. "You're asking me to hunt them," Eleanor stated rather than asked. "I'm asking you to save lives," Harrington corrected. Starting with the 3 silverfish operators currently en route to Fort Kessler. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, calculations and probabilities racing through her enhanced mind. When she opened them again, her decision was evident in her posture, the civilian uncertainty replaced by military precision. "I'll need equipment," she said, rising to her feet, "and I'll need unrestricted access to all silverfish operational data." Relief crossed Harrington's face. "Already arranged. There's a secure armory prepared with everything you might need. And Captain," he added as they moved toward the door, "whatever happens, this time the truth will be told. No more buried heroes, no more convenient lies. You have my word." Eleanor's smile held equal parts skepticism and hope. "With respect, General, I've heard those words before." "Then judge me by my actions," Harrington replied, "not my words." As they exited into the corridor, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the hallways in crimson warning. "Perimeter breach," a security officer reported, rushing toward them. 3 unidentified individuals have neutralized the northeast guard post. They're inside the compound. "Silverfish operators," Eleanor confirmed, her posture shifting subtly into combat readiness. Sooner than expected. Harrington turned to Lawrence. "Get your subjects to the secure bunker. Initiate protocol blackout." As Lawrence hurried away, Harrington faced Eleanor. "Are you ready for this, Captain?" Eleanor's eyes held the focused determination of someone who had carried impossible burdens and survived. "Ready doesn't enter into it, General. Necessary does." Around them, Fort Kessler transformed from research facility to battleground. Security personnel rushing to defensive positions, blast doors sealing critical areas. In the midst of the controlled chaos, Eleanor stood perfectly still, her enhanced mind mapping every corridor, calculating every approach, preparing to face enemies created in her own image. "Before we do this," she said to Harrington, "I need you to promise me one thing." "Name it," the general replied without hesitation. "Lieutenant Ramsey and the others like her," Eleanor said. "Whatever happens today, they deserve better than to be classified as failed experiments and forgotten. They deserve the truth about what was done to them." Harrington nodded solemnly. "You have my word. No more buried heroes." Eleanor accepted his promise with a slight nod. "Then let's finish what Khalistan started." Together, they moved purposefully toward the armory, 2 soldiers preparing once again to face impossible choices with impossible consequences. The burden of command meeting the burden of capability in a crucible of their own making. The armory's reinforced door sealed behind Eleanor with a pneumatic hiss as emergency lights cast everything in an eerie red glow. Weapons of every description lined the walls. Standard military-issue firearms, alongside prototype devices that would never appear in any official inventory. Eleanor moved through the space with practiced efficiency, her enhanced mind assessing and selecting equipment based on calculations too complex for ordinary human reasoning. 3 silverfish operators, she said, more to herself than to General Harrington, who stood watching her from the doorway. Augmented neural processing, enhanced physical capabilities, no ethical constraints. "Can you stop them?" Harrington asked, his military bearing unable to completely mask his concern. Eleanor strapped a tactical vest over her worn civilian clothes, the incongruity creating a visual metaphor for her existence, neither fully soldier nor civilian, caught between worlds. Stop them? Possibly. Save them? That's the real question. They're compromised assets at this point, Harrington noted grimly. Containment is the priority. Eleanor checked the action on a modified sidearm before securing it in a holster. That's where we differ, General. They're not assets. They're soldiers who had their humanity stripped away by the same program that tried to strip away mine. She selected several non-lethal devices from a specialized cabinet, securing them to her vest. I won't execute them for the crime of being weaponized against their will. Harrington's expression softened with unexpected understanding. That's why you survived Khalistan when others didn't. You never lost sight of the humanity behind the mission. A sad smile touched Eleanor's lips. A questionable advantage in our line of work. The facility's alarm system shifted tone, indicating escalating threat levels. Harrington's radio crackled with urgent updates from security teams. The Silverfish operators have breached the main research wing. They've disabled the security forces without fatalities. Precise incapacitation rather than lethal force. They're here for the research data, not a body count, Eleanor concluded, making final adjustments to her equipment. That means we still have a chance to resolve this without further casualties. She turned to face Harrington fully, her posture shifting into something that made the general instinctively straighten his spine, the unmistakable presence of natural command. I need you to evacuate all non-essential personnel and secure the Silverback subjects in the bunker. No one engages the Silverfish operators except me. Captain, with all due respect, Harrington began, but Eleanor cut him off. This isn't a tactical suggestion, General. It's operational necessity. Your security teams are trained to fight human opponents. These aren't human opponents in any conventional sense. They process information, anticipate responses, and execute countermeasures faster than ordinary soldiers can perceive them. Harrington absorbed this with the gravity it deserved. Like you. Similar, but fundamentally different, Eleanor corrected. I maintained integration between augmented and natural neural systems. They've been pushed toward pure augmentation at the expense of human judgment. She checked a final device before securing it at the small of her back, which gives me one critical advantage. What's that? Harrington asked. I remember what it means to be human, Eleanor replied simply. They've had that programming systematically erased. The lights flickered throughout the facility as the Silverfish operators interfered with base systems. Eleanor moved toward the door with purpose, but Harrington stepped into her path. Before you go, he said, reaching into his pocket to retrieve a small object. This belongs to you. He opened his palm to reveal a set of dog tags, worn and battered, but unmistakably military issue. Eleanor stared at them with an expression that contained multitudes. Recognition, pain, determination. Where did you get these? She asked, her voice barely audible. They were recovered from Khalistan, Harrington explained. Along with your Medal of Honor, they were supposed to be buried in your empty grave at Arlington. I kept them instead. Eleanor took the tags with reverent care, running her thumb over the embossed name. Hawkins, Eleanor J. The movement revealed a small inscription on the back that wasn't standard issue, a line of text added personally. What we do in life echoes in eternity. My team gave me these before my final deployment, she explained, slipping the chain over her head. The tags settled against her chest, like a forgotten piece of herself returning home. A reminder that actions have consequences beyond our understanding. Wise words, Harrington observed. Words I failed to live up to. Eleanor corrected, tucking the tags beneath her shirt. Until today. With that, she moved past him into the corridor, transformed in ways that went beyond equipment or posture. Captain Eleanor Hawkins, Medal of Honor recipient, augmented operative, survivor of impossible choices, had fully re-emerged from the shell of Eleanor Reeves. The facility's emergency lighting created pools of shadow between harsh red illumination as Eleanor moved with tactical precision through deserted corridors. Security personnel had established defensive positions at key junctures, but fell back at her approach, following Harrington's orders to disengage. Eleanor paused at an intersection, her augmented senses extending beyond normal human perception. The subtle vibration of footsteps on metal flooring. The almost imperceptible shift in air current from a door opening 3 corridors away. The faint electromagnetic signature of active communication devices. Her mind processed this data instantaneously, constructing a 3-dimensional tactical map that updated in real time. 3 targets moving with coordinated precision toward the central data core. 2 male, 1 female, based on weight distribution and stride length. All armed with non-lethal weaponry, confirming her theory that they sought information, not casualties. Eleanor made her decision, moving toward an auxiliary access corridor that would intercept their path. As she navigated the labyrinthine facility, her thoughts turned to the Silverfish operators themselves, soldiers who had volunteered for a program they believed would make them more effective protectors, only to be transformed into weapons without conscience or choice. Like looking in a mirror, she murmured to herself, remembering her own transformation years earlier. The difference was that she had fought to maintain her humanity against protocols designed to override it. These operators had been given no such opportunity, their ethical frameworks systematically dismantled in the name of operational efficiency. The sound of conflict reached her enhanced hearing, the distinctive discharge of electroshock weapons and the collapse of security personnel. She increased her pace, rounding a corner to find herself face-to-face with the first silverfish operator. He stood over the unconscious forms of two security guards, his movements mechanical yet fluid as he secured their weapons. Though dressed in nondescript tactical gear, his nature was betrayed by his eyes, flat, hyper-focused, constantly shifting as his augmented mind processed environmental data at inhuman speeds. Eleanor stepped into the open, making no attempt at stealth. "Operator 37, she said, reading the microscopic identifier embedded in his tactical vest, invisible to normal perception but clear to her enhanced vision. The man's head snapped toward her with unnatural speed, his expression showing the first flicker of surprise as his augmented systems registered a presence his tactical programming hadn't anticipated. "Captain Eleanor Hawkins," he responded after a microsecond of processing. "Designation: Ghost. Status: terminated. Threat assessment: maximum." "Someone's been reading my file," Eleanor noted calmly, maintaining a non-threatening posture while her mind calculated 17 different combat scenarios simultaneously, though they got the terminated part wrong. Operator 37's hand moved toward his weapon with superhuman speed, but Eleanor was already in motion, not to attack, but to establish position. She circled to his left, maintaining precise distance. "You don't want to do this," she said, her voice carrying an authority that penetrated even his compromised neural programming. "Your operational parameters have been corrupted. You're being used for an unauthorized action against American military personnel." The operator paused, his augmented mind processing her statement against programmed parameters. This momentary hesitation, this ghost of independent thought, confirmed Eleanor's theory that the silverfish suppression of natural neural pathways wasn't complete. "Operation Blacklight has proper authorization," he stated, though something like uncertainty flickered behind his eyes. "Director Corrigan initiated activation protocols." "Under duress or false information," Eleanor countered, continuing her careful movement to maintain optimal position. "Think, operator. What's your mission objective?" "Secure research data on Project Silverback. Eliminate resistance if necessary." And why would the Director of Defense Intelligence need to send augmented operators to secure data he already has legal access to? The question landed like a stone in still water, creating ripples of disturbance across the operator's programmed certainty. His head tilted slightly, a human gesture incongruous with his mechanical movements. "Command authentication required," he said finally, his voice less certain. Eleanor recognized the request, a failsafe built into their programming to verify orders when conflicting information was presented. She had seconds to capitalize on this opening before his augmented systems overrode the uncertainty. "Authentication Delta 9 Echo 7, she said, providing the emergency override code she had extracted from the Silverback files. "Stand down, operator. You're being used against your own people." For a moment, hope flared as the operator's posture shifted slightly toward compliance. Then his eyes hardened again, augmented programming reasserting control. "Authentication rejected," he stated flatly. "You are not in the command chain. Threat assessment. Maximum." He moved with inhuman speed, closing the distance between them in a blur of motion that would have been impossible to track with normal human perception. But Eleanor wasn't limited by normal perception. Her augmented systems matched his processing speed, calculating trajectory, force, and countermeasures in the microseconds before impact. Unlike him, however, her responses integrated both augmented precision and natural human adaptability. She pivoted at the last possible moment, using his momentum against him while attaching one of her specialized devices to his tactical vest. The operator registered the attachment and immediately moved to remove it, but Eleanor had already created distance between them. "I'm sorry," she said sincerely as the device activated, emitting a localized electromagnetic pulse specifically calibrated to disrupt neural augmentation systems. The operator froze mid-motion, his augmented neural pathways temporarily overloaded. A normal EMP would have been ineffective against the shielded technology, but Eleanor's modifications targeted specific frequencies based on her intimate knowledge of the Lazarus Protocol. As he struggled against the disruption, Eleanor approached cautiously. "Your name is Lieutenant Michael Rivera," she said, using information she had gleaned from the Silverfish files. 82nd Airborne Division. Bronze Star recipient. You volunteered for the program to improve battlefield medical response times. The operator's eyes widened fractionally, recognition fighting through program suppression. How? How do you know that? Because I was you, Eleanor answered simply. The first test subject for neural augmentation. The prototype they used to create you. She carefully removed his weapons, maintaining safe distance. The difference is that I refused to let them erase my humanity. And deep down, under all that programming, you're fighting to hold on to yours too. Lieutenant Rivera's struggles weakened as the disruption spread through his augmented systems, forcing a reboot that temporarily restored natural neural pathways. Confusion replaced the mechanical precision in his expression. What? What's happening to me? He asked, his voice suddenly human again, frightened and disoriented. Neural reset, Eleanor explained, securing his hands with specialized restraints. Temporary disruption of the augmentation overlay, allowing your natural neural architecture to reassert itself. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by horror. I remember attacking our own people, but I couldn't stop myself. The commands, they bypassed everything, like I was a passenger in my own body. I know, Eleanor said gently. The same thing almost happened to me in Khalistan. The difference was that I had modified my integration protocols to maintain control. She activated her communication device. General, I've neutralized one Silverfish operator, Lieutenant Michael Rivera. He's experiencing temporary neural reset and needs medical supervision. Send a team to my location, but approach with caution. He may revert when the disruption fades. Understood, Captain, Harrington's voice replied. Be advised, the other two operators have reached the central data core. Dr. Lawrence is attempting to secure the systems. Eleanor's expression hardened. Lawrence shouldn't be anywhere near the data core. He should be with the silverback subjects in the secure bunker. He insisted on protecting the research personally, Harrington explained, frustration evident in his tone. Eleanor secured Rivera in a recovery position, meeting his frightened gaze with compassion. Help is coming, Lieutenant. Hold on to yourself for as long as you can. Remember who you really are. Will I stay me? He asked, the terror of lost identity evident in his voice. Not without intervention, Eleanor answered honestly. But I promise you this. When this is over, I'll help you find your way back permanently. She rose and moved toward the central data core with renewed urgency, her enhanced mind calculating optimal routes while processing the implications of Lawrence's presence. The scientist's devotion to his research had always bordered on obsession, but risking his life to protect it suggested motivations beyond scientific preservation. The central data core resided in a heavily fortified chamber at the heart of the facility, a room lined with servers containing the sum total of the silverback and silverfish research. As Eleanor approached, she detected signs of recent conflict, disabled security systems, neutralized guards, forced entry. She paused outside the sealed doors, her augmented senses perceiving details invisible to normal observation. 3 heartbeats inside, 2 with the accelerated rhythm characteristic of augmented operators, 1 with the irregular pattern of extreme stress. Lawrence's voice carried through the reinforced door, high-pitched with fear but attempting authority. You don't understand what you're doing, he was saying. This research represents years of development. National security implications beyond your clearance. Our clearance is not the issue, Doctor, a female voice responded with mechanical precision. Our authorization comes directly from Director Corrigan. Project Silverback is being consolidated with Project Silverfish under unified command. Eleanor processed this information against what she already knew, pieces clicking into place with cold clarity. This wasn't a rogue operation. It was a sanctioned consolidation of power. The Silverfish operators weren't here to steal the research. They were here to secure it under new authority. She reached a decision, activating a specialized device that would breach the door's electronic locks. As the system cycled through override protocols, she prepared herself for what would likely be a much more difficult confrontation than with Lieutenant Rivera. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the scene inside. Dr. Lawrence stood backed against the main server terminal, his hands raised in defensive posture. Before him stood two silverfish operators, a tall, muscular male and a compact female, both displaying the characteristic mechanical precision and flat affect of fully integrated subjects. All three turned to Eleanor's entrance, reactions varying from Lawrence's visible relief to the operator's immediate combat readiness. The female operator, designated 42 on her tactical vest, moved with blurring speed to position herself between Eleanor and the servers. "Captain Eleanor Hawkins," she stated, her voice devoid of inflection, "your presence is unexpected but not unwelcome. Your expertise with early-phase integration will be valuable to the consolidated program." Eleanor remained in the doorway, carefully assessing tactical options. Unlike Rivera, these operators showed no signs of uncertainty or conflict. Their programming appeared seamlessly integrated, suggesting more advanced suppression of natural neural pathways. "There is no consolidated program," Eleanor responded, directing her words not to the operators, but to Lawrence. "That's what this is really about, isn't it, Doctor? Not protecting the research from unauthorized access, but ensuring your continued control over it." Lawrence's expression shifted from fear to calculation, confirming her suspicion. "You always were too perceptive for your own good, Captain. It's what made you such an effective test subject, and such a problematic one." He straightened, dropping the pretense of the frightened scientist. "Project Silverback has reached its developmental limits under military oversight. Too many restrictions, too many ethical concerns, too many questions about long-term viability and, quote, subject welfare." "So you arranged a transfer of authority," Eleanor concluded, "from military to intelligence oversight. Fewer restrictions, fewer ethical reviews, unlimited black budget funding." "A necessary evolution," Lawrence defended. "The Chinese program has advanced beyond our projections. Their integrated operators are already deployed in sensitive operations worldwide. We can't afford to fall behind because of squeamish oversight committees." The male operator, designated 45, maintained his position with unnatural stillness. "This facility is now under Defense Intelligence Agency control. All personnel will submit to new command protocols or face containment." Eleanor processed options with inhuman speed, calculating probabilities and outcomes. Taking on two fully integrated operators simultaneously presented minimal chances of success, using the same approach that had worked with Rivera. A new strategy was required. "Dr. Lawrence," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded elite teams in the world's most dangerous environments. "You're making a critical error based on incomplete data." Lawrence's expression flickered with the scientist's instinctive response to new information. "What incomplete data?" "The silverfish operators," Eleanor explained, maintaining careful eye contact with both augmented soldiers. "They're experiencing accelerated neural degradation, just like the silverback subjects. The only difference is that their emotional suppression prevents them from reporting symptoms." She turned her attention directly to the operators. "When did the headaches begin? The momentary lapses in processing? The microsecond delays between decision and action?" Both operators remained impassive, but Eleanor's enhanced perception detected subtle shifts in their posture, the first signs of uncertainty penetrating programmed certainty. "Captain Hawkins is attempting psychological manipulation," Lawrence declared, though a note of doubt had entered his voice. "Disregard her statements and proceed with the data transfer." "I can prove it," Eleanor countered, slowly reaching toward her pocket. Both operators tensed, weapons rising in perfect synchronization. "Easy. I'm just retrieving a diagnostic tool." With deliberate movements, she withdrew a small device similar to the one she had used to display her neural mapping earlier. "This scanner will show neural activity patterns. If I'm wrong, your programming will continue uninterrupted. If I'm right, you deserve to know what's happening to your minds." The female operator's head tilted slightly, the same human gesture Rivera had displayed when confronting conflicting information. "Diagnostic assessment is not within mission parameters." Your mission parameters include securing Silverback research data, Eleanor pointed out. This scanner contains proprietary Silverback diagnostic protocols not included in the main database. Relevant to your mission objective. The operators exchanged a glance, a surprisingly human moment of silent communication. After a microsecond of calculation, the female operator nodded once. Proceed with diagnostic demonstration, she authorized. Maintain safe distance. Eleanor activated the device, which projected a holographic display of neural activity patterns. This is a baseline human neural scan, she explained, showing a complex but organized network of pathways. And this, she continued, adjusting the display, is my neural scan, showing integrated augmentation with maintained natural architecture. The operators studied the display with the intense focus of augmented perception, absorbing and analyzing the information at superhuman speeds. Finally, Eleanor said, making a final adjustment, this is a scan of Lieutenant Rivera, the silverfish operator I encountered earlier. Note the degradation patterns in these regions, consistent with what we're seeing in the silverback subjects. The female operator stepped closer, her augmented vision allowing her to perceive details invisible to normal human sight. These patterns match internal diagnostic inconsistencies I have been experiencing but unable to report. That's by design, Eleanor explained. Your programming includes suppression protocols that prevent you from recognizing or reporting degradation. It's meant to extend your operational viability by bypassing self-preservation instincts. Lawrence moved suddenly, reaching for a control panel. This is absurd. You're interfering with a sanctioned operation based on manipulated data. The male operator turned with unnatural speed, restraining Lawrence with mechanical precision. The doctor is attempting to initiate remote shutdown protocols, he observed dispassionately. This suggests Captain Hawkins's assessment has validity. Eleanor felt a surge of hope. The first indication that the operator's programming wasn't as absolute as it appeared. Their augmented intelligence was recognizing patterns their emotional suppression should have prevented them from acting upon. Listen to me, she said, addressing both operators directly. You volunteered for this program believing you were serving your country. Instead, you've been transformed into weapons without consent or full disclosure. The neural degradation will continue until cascade failure occurs, unless you receive the modified integration protocols I developed. The female operator processed this information with visible calculation. If your assessment is accurate, all silverfish operators face terminal neural degradation within an estimated timeframe of 6 to 8 months. Yes, Eleanor confirmed. But it can be prevented. The same modifications that have kept me functional for 8 years can be adapted for your neural architecture. This is treason, Lawrence protested, struggling against the male operator's grip. You're sabotaging a critical national security program based on unverified theories. Not theories, Eleanor corrected, advancing the holographic display to show more detailed neural mapping. Empirical evidence documented over 8 years of self-modification and adaptation. The kind of longitudinal study you never bothered to conduct before deploying human subjects. She turned back to the operators. You have a choice to make. Continue with your current mission and face certain neural collapse, or help me develop a solution that could save 27 lives, including your own. For several seconds, the operators remained motionless, their augmented minds processing implications and calculating probabilities at speeds beyond normal human comprehension. Then, with perfect synchronization, they both reached up and removed the specialized communication devices from their ears, severing the direct command link to their handlers. We will assist, the female operator stated, her voice maintaining its mechanical precision but carrying a hint of something else, the first emergence of individual choice from beneath programmed compliance. Lawrence's face contorted with rage and disbelief. You can't do this. The program protocols prevent direct disobedience. Incorrect, the male operator responded. The protocols prevent recognition of ethical conflicts with mission parameters. Captain Hawkins has reframed the situation as a tactical assessment of operator preservation, which falls within acceptable decision matrices. Eleanor felt a surge of satisfaction. They had found the loophole in their own programming, using the augmented intelligence that was meant to make them perfect weapons to recognize the flaws in that very design. Secure Dr. Lawrence, she instructed. Then contact the other silverfish operators with this information. We need to suspend Operation Blacklight until we can assess how many of your team have been compromised. As the operators moved to comply, Eleanor activated her communication device. General Harrington, the situation is contained. The Silverfish operators have recognized the manipulation of their programming and are standing down. Understood, Captain, Harrington replied, relief evident in his voice. What about the data core? Eleanor glanced at the servers containing years of research, work that had created both miracles and monsters. The data is secure, but we need to have a serious conversation about its future applications. She turned to watch as the Silverfish operators efficiently secured Lawrence and began establishing communication with their team members at other locations. Their movements remained precise and mechanical, but subtle changes in their body language suggested the first stirrings of reclaimed humanity beneath the programming. In that moment, standing amid the technological marvels and moral failures of the program that had both enhanced and nearly destroyed her, Eleanor felt the weight of the Medal of Honor in her backpack and the dog tags against her chest, symbols of sacrifice and duty that had carried her through 8 years of isolation and struggle, now pointing toward a new mission, not of combat, but of redemption. What happens now? The female operator asked, her tone still flat but the question itself revealing the human uncertainty beneath the augmentation. Eleanor looked at her with understanding born of shared experience. Now we rebuild what they took from you. We find a way back to who you were before they tried to turn you into something else. Is that possible? The operator pressed. To go back? Eleanor's smile held the wisdom of someone who had walked this impossible path before. Not back, she corrected gently. Forward, but on your own terms, not theirs. Outside the data core, alarms had silenced and emergency lights returned to normal illumination. Throughout the facility, silverfish and silverback subjects were being gathered for assessment and treatment. A new chapter was beginning, one that would require courage of a different kind than battlefields demanded. Eleanor touched the dog tags beneath her shirt, feeling the inscription pressed against her fingertips. What we do in life echoes in eternity. For the first time in 8 years, those words felt not like an accusation, but like a promise. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.